I have the pleasure of welcoming here in this workshop a very young, versatile case author, Sarvajita Verma. She has been the founder of the Marketing Insight, and she comes with both industry and academia background, a perfect mix of industry and academia background. She has been associated with Cipla as the training manager, and then she has been part of a lot of other companies with both into the B2B and B2B sales and marketing training and their digital marketing arenas. And today we have requested her to be part of this workshop because she has been an author where she has authored 5 cases which have been part of the Richard Ivey case center, which has been and probably that is the one of the fundamental reason why I thought that we should have her in this workshop. And then probably the cases that she have also handled is also very interesting. Cases right from the case like a Ultratech cement case to a case where we are talking about a pharmaceutical company and how they are reacting to the COVID situation. So I think this makes it important to also emphasize here that probably when we look into cases, cases are something which do not really require anybody's very strong PhD background. That is something which I really want to emphasize here. Anybody can be a case author if you have a very strong understanding of your subject and you have a connect with the industry. You are ready with it. And probably unlike the research papers where even for the publication a lot of challenges comes in as to what has been your background, are you a PhD or a non-PhD kind of a thing. Those challenges are not there. And secondly, cases are something which are being read by people, and I think research papers are very limited readership as such. Cases have got huge readership. So that is why cases at times can be very rewarding, because you might get across with a person who would say, oh yes, I know you because I read a case which was authored by you. So that's the beauty of the whole concept of writing a case, which becomes very rewarding, both as a faculty, as a trainer, and a person from industry. Anybody can really be authoring a case. So with these words, I would request Sarjita to take over. Over to you, Sarjita. Welcome to the session.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. A very good morning to all of you. Thank you so much, Anuja ma'am, for your really kind words and giving me an opportunity to be here today, interacting with a diverse pool of participants. Although, when probably if you would have met into a physical domain, I would have also got to learn a lot from your expertise. But unfortunately, today we will be restricting ourselves in terms of time and our interaction. But I will certainly be taking you through a journey. And as ma'am said, there can be any point where we can start and then take it ahead. So I'll just share my screen with you. All right, so ma'am has already spoken a lot about me. I will be going directly on to what I have been doing and then what I intend to do further. So being a part of B School, I take a lot of courses in marketing and entrepreneurship domain. Though PBM, advertising, digital marketing, and marketing analytics have been my core areas, and I do conduct a lot of workshops for corporates, B School faculty, as well as the students. So it is certainly a pleasure interacting with all of you today over a very important pedagogical tool in our B School teaching, which is the case study. So far in this workshop, you would have been acquainted with a lot of aspects about case writing and case teaching and have been well versed with a detailed case writing methodology. So in today's session, we would be specifically discussing about the challenges that we usually face as a case writer. I would start with the first case that I ever wrote. It was Wild Chef Limited, which was based upon a cloud-based restaurant. So I would say that writing a case, it was not something which came very naturally as a first choice, because initially when I entered academics, like other B schools, the core focus was on writing the research papers. But in 2016, when I got to teach a course in entrepreneurship, I noticed that most of the cases which were available in the entrepreneurship domain, so these cases were basically not from the Indian context, but from an international perspective, which made it very difficult to customize these cases to the Indian context. Moreover, the few cases that I could find my hands upon to teach in the classroom, which could go with the flow of the curriculum, these cases were very old cases and not something which was added to the newly written case pool. So again, that made it very difficult, because though there was a lot of focus in 2016 on the startup ecosystem, even by the government of India, and a lot of startups were coming across, but those startups were actually not captured into the form of a case study which we could utilize into our classroom teaching. So what I started doing was that, these recent initiatives that were being taken, I will probably pick one or two of them and discuss them only very lightly into my classroom teaching. And these are basically picked up from various areas like CNBC Brand Bazaar, the articles that would come in brand equity, or even on a forum like Your Story. But I would say again that the formal concept of the case teaching was missing there. So basically, I thought that in the coming summer break, I would certainly write a case study which could add up to this pool and also help me in teaching my courses in the coming years. Though it was not very easy, because regularly we were bombarded with so much of regular faculty workload that finding out time was not really very easy. But during the break, I got to know of a competition which was being organized by the Prestige Institute. Though the reward was not very encouraging and motivating, but the only factor which motivated me was that the cases which would probably be on a winning spree will go on to be published into the case center, which was again something very great for a newbie like me who had never attempted writing a case study. Now, so though marketing was primarily my core area, and I had access to companies being part of the industry, but then I wanted to write specifically in entrepreneurship because I felt that the gap was there. So I started writing out long emailers to a lot of people, asking them, trying to convince them that I'm interested in writing a case study, because the case studies of Indian origin are very limited. And then being a B school faculty, I would somehow try to make my contribution into that domain. Frankly speaking, I did not get a very positive response from most of the people that I approached. Few people who did revert me, they were not ready to contribute in terms of giving their business insights or sharing their data, which would go into the formulation of a field-based case study. Two of the people whom I came across who willingly showed their interest to proceed further with the case study development were, one was from the healthcare sector and another was a case study on Wild Chef. Now, Wild Chef was basically a cloud kitchen kind of a concept in which technology had an important role to play. So with digital technology scaling up of a business, something like a food tech sector, I think this concept really appealed to me, and I thought that I will probably be proceeding ahead. So I arranged for a detailed interview with the owner of the organization, and I took a detailed interview wherein I asked him about the business model in detail, how he has been doing, his operational nitty-gritties, how he has done so far, when did the break even come, when is he planning to scale it up, how exactly he is planning to scale it up. So though he provided me with a lot of insights on what exactly he was doing and what he planned or intended to do, but then all this came up with a caution that since our concept is new, I do not want you to divulge our strategies to the audience, because that would make our competitors replicate probably what we have been doing. So though I had access to data at that point of time and access to insights, again, the challenge was that what exactly has to be written into the form of a case study. While I was thinking of doing all this, something unexpected happened. My husband got a project in US wherein he was relocating, and I had no choice but to fly along with him. So now this prestige case study competition was out of question. And after reaching US, I thought that since I had already worked so much on it, I would probably try and put this case study directly to Case Center so that at least it gets published. Uh, Now taking it ahead again was a challenge because of the difference in time zones. I was based in US, and then India, we had significant difference in the time zones here and there. But then the person was quite cooperative, though I had to stretch myself and be available whenever, he gave me a time to interview and discuss further on the case study. uh, while I was thinking that I would be now sending my case study to this case center directly, suddenly I came across a conference which was the NACRA conference, the North American Case Research Association, which is one of the most prestigious conferences which happen in US. The date was quite approaching, and I thought I will give it a try. So I sent in my abstract. Since the concept was relatively new, they also liked the concept, and they readily accepted the abstract and invited me for the conference. So I wrote up an email to my college asking them that so and so is the conference and I have been selected. My paper has, my case study has really received a warm response. So I would appreciate if you could sponsor me the conference fees, which was a whooping $500. Of course, the college said that being on sabbatical, there was no provision that they could sponsor me for the amount. But since I was so close to it and I knew that do not know whenever probably I would be coming back again to US, that too specifically for a conference, so I didn't want to miss the opportunity at any cost. So I thought I will spend this entire amount by myself and certainly give it a try. I wrote the entire case study along with the instructor manual and went to present my case study in that conference. The case was received very warmly there, and I also received a lot of constructive feedback from the track chair who basically motivated and guided me as to how I could enhance my case studies so that it is more suitable to a global audience. So it was at that point of time when I realized that whenever we write a case study, there are many things which we feel are obvious and would be understood. For example, this food tech sector, but now this US market was not at all aware of what exactly a food tech sector is. So what they understood was that it was basically a cloud restaurant and there is nothing like a food tech sector. So I had to explain them that it is basically again that restaurant business only, but then the entire backend operations is basically technology enabled. So these little feedbacks that I got to know that the case study would have to be revised to a certain extent, so that again it becomes more appealing to a global audience. Now what happened was that there are a lot of case publishers which had come there into that conference, including Ivey. Moreover, the case research journal which NACRA publishes has also a tie-up with Ivey, wherein all those cases which get published on CRJ actually go into Ivey. So both of them again say that they have a very stringent review process of the cases there. But then I thought that okay, I will be making the corrections as to what have been told to me in that case study. So this is the picture of the NACRA conference when I went there. And then after making those changes, I basically submitted my case study to Ivey. Now Ivey had a stringent review process of 5 rounds, and I was expecting that there are very senior people already present in the academics who had shared that it is almost impossible to get a case study through Ivey because of the stringent review process. They have a review process of 5 rounds, and then it is not a peer review, it is reviewed by the faculty members of Ivey itself. I thought that being a newbie, probably it would be very difficult, and I thought it will not be a wise idea because I was very desperate to at least get a publication rather than getting a publication in Ivey. It was at that point of time when we know at times we also need a small push and then underestimate ourselves. So it was at that point of time when my husband motivated me that you should probably attempt sending a case there. what max will happen is that you will face a rejection, nothing else is going to happen. If it gets rejected, then the option of sending it to case center is always open, and by chance if it gets accepted, it is nothing like that. So I sent my case study to Ivy, and I did not hear anything from them for 2 months. After 2 months, I got a response from them saying that the case was pretty much accepted as it is, something which was very rare. There were only minimal changes which were required in order to enhance its suitability according to the standards of Ivy. So, for example, each jargon that I had mentioned, so they needed an explanation of that jargon, and there were certain things which we feel were quite obvious. For example, all throughout, all this while we have been speaking fresher. So then I got to know that it is not fresher; it is basically freshman. So all those places where I had written fresher, it had to be replaced by a freshman, and certain those jargons had to be sorry had to be basically changed. So 2017, I had presented in NACRA. 2017 itself, I submitted my first case study to Ivy, which got basically published in the year 2008, early 2018. So this conference of NACRA was certainly a turning point for me, which motivated me that I could, probably attempt further into the area of case writing. And ever since, almost every year, I have been publishing case studies in Ivy. Currently, I am also a reviewer with NACRA. So, starting from 2018, I have been reviewing cases for their case study conferences every year. Now, if I talk about the case journey, so basically, these are the 5 cases which have been published as of now. So, first was the Wild Chef case, which was on a cloud based restaurant. Then another was the Ultratech cement case. Again, this was also an interdisciplinary case. This was a case which I really wanted to write, though this was not from my domain. So my domain was marketing and entrepreneurship, and this case was basically an organizational behavior. So I had to do a lot of back-end research so that my case is suitable to that kind of an audience, wherein I'm able to give some inputs. The next 3 cases have been again from the healthcare sector, but each of these cases have been very diverse. So, for example, this case on CQ Max, CQ Max is basically nanocurcumin. Now, that was also an innovative concept that was being launched by a pharmaceutical company in India. So, nanocurcumin is basically the active ingredient of turmeric, which is being used into a lot of lot of medicinal purposes. So being Indian, we all know that what are the benefits of turmeric, but to convince it to a scientific community that turmeric has a wide usage for treating the cancer patient as well as the patients who are suffering from gout and arthritis, a syrup which basically gives the benefit of the entire turmeric. So that was basically the product CQ Max, and then it was a product. The case study is based on the launch of the product, wherein the company was trying to establish the market because such type of market was not existing in India, and it was not an Ayurvedic formulation. So it was basically a pharmaceutical formulation into a nutraceutical segment. So the challenges were different. The next was about Cipla Limited, wherein I spoke about the inhalation therapy segment. So now this inhalation therapy segment, Cipla is very popular. They are basically the market leaders. And this was again a different concept wherein they had hired doctors. Getting access to this case was easy because I had myself worked in Cipla as a training manager. So it was just I had to get through the right person, and they were readily willing to share the entire data with me, so that was easy. And the last case that I wrote, which has been published very recently, that is seeing the popularity of the previous case study of Cipla onto the inhalation therapy. I was approached by Cipla to write a case study, and the brief that I got was that we have a product. That product has been performing well into the Nepal pharmaceutical market, and for the first time now, that product has become a market leader. Now, we do not know what exactly has to be written, but we want you to write a case study for us, which could basically highlight our challenges and then the success journey. So by the time we got everything going, the biggest challenge came, which was of COVID-19. And then the entire case study was based around that. So, though we have been facing different challenges, but then I would try to summarize few challenges which which we face normally as a case writer, which are the most common, or I would say the most prominent challenges that we face. But before I do that, I will just quickly take you through the process of writing a field-based case study. So it starts with, of course, identifying your niche. What is your area, whether it is entrepreneurship, marketing, finance, accounting, or you are trying to write an interdisciplinary case study. Then identifying the protagonist, doing a pre-preparation, taking interviews, preparing the draft, gathering the data, the relevant primary and the secondary data, preparing a final manuscript, and then along with the approval from the organization, you're sending it to the submission to the case publishers. So these are the common challenges that we normally face. First and foremost is identifying the protagonist. Now, when I say identifying the protagonist, it basically means that there would be a lot of people. If you try and convince them, especially startups, they might be readily willing to share some data with you, or getting their case study written. But for a bigger organization, in case the person on whom you are writing a case study is not onto a very senior type of a senior management kind of a level, they will not be able to share the data and insights with you. For example, if the person is just a front no first line or second line manager, they will not be having access to that data, and then the process of approval would be very complicated. So it is always advisable to take to identify a protagonist who is from the senior management team. So in fact, my all protagonists have been, so two cases on entrepreneurship, the protagonist of course has been the founder member, and the other three cases that I have written, the protagonist has been again from the CXO team only. So it was the chief operating officer in Ultratech, and then it has been the country head, and then the business head in Cipla. Then the biggest challenge, especially into these bigger organizations, is convincing the organization about the benefits of the case study. So in case if the person who are talking to has been a part of a B school, or has been a part of an active community wherein a lot of case study based approach is taken, or belongs to an organization where a lot of internal cases are also being used in training purposes, it is easier to convince them, else it becomes little difficult. The third is a complicated process of approval. So there was an organization, Reliance Limited. I thought of writing a case study on them. I was on a very level of advanced talks with them. We had done a lot of groundwork. I would say 70-80% of the groundwork, and then the initial 2 rounds of interview and everything was done. And at the last moment, I got a rejection stating that the organization is against all these, because they do not want that the organization the any information should go into the public domain. So it was at that point of time from where I had to revert back. And then I thought that whenever next I would be approaching any organization, the first and foremost thing would be to tell them about each and everything as to how the consent and the primary data and what all types of data would be required in order to proceed further. So if the protagonist says that yes, he himself is ready to willingly ready to sign the consent form and give the entire data which would be required during the course of development of case study, then only I proceed, else I think it is advisable not to proceed further. Then manuscript preparation. Now what happens is, most of the time what we also do with a research paper is that we first write a case study, and then we start searching for a relevant publisher who can basically publish our case study. I would always advise you to go vice versa. You always zero down on who is your publisher whom you would be focusing, whether it is Ivey, whether it is Howard, whether it is a case journal that you are targeting, something like Emerald Emerging Market Case Study, or a case research journal, or even for that matter an IIM Bangalore journal. Whosoever you are targeting, kindly read their guidelines and the kind of cases that they accept very properly, and also read few sample cases that they have been publishing. This will give you really a very fair idea as to how you should be approaching your case study. So for example, Richard Ivey says that their entire case study should not be more than 8 pages, and including the data exhibits, it should not be exceeding 15 pages. Same applies with the instructor manual. It has to have an instructor manual. And again, the instructor manual should not be increasing 15 pages. Now with instructor manual also, their guidelines keep on changing. So whenever you write the case study, it is always advisable to read the recent guidelines. So for example, when I wrote my first case study, the only requirement was to submit a board plan, and that too the board plan was something which was very voluntary. Now the board plan is something which is mandatory. Plus, this from this year onwards, ever since everybody has moved to an online teaching kind of a methodology, so including an online teaching plan has been made mandatory by Richard Ivey. So if your an online teaching plan doesn't basically mean that we will be preparing our slides and sharing it through the Zoom platform or the Microsoft Team platform. An online teaching methodology basically means that how exactly you are going to replicate your classroom teaching through an online portal. So for example, I picked up a platform which was Strategizer, and I told them that how through Strategizer we can be making the online teaching more interesting. So there are many multiple platforms that you can pick up. Basically what they are interested to know is that, are you using polls, are you using question, how exactly you would be engaging the students if your students are not into a physical classroom and are not visible to you. So how exactly, when their cameras and their audio is turned off, you would be having an interactive discussion so as to keep them engaged during the entire course of discussion. The next important, and I would say a very alarming challenge, of course, is copy editing. So while Emerald and all, they give you the copy editing is done complimentary by the journal. Ivy does not do a complimentary copy editing. So they do two levels of copy editing. One is complimentary, but before they proceed with that copy editing, they ask you to get your entire case as well as your instructor manual copy edited by a professional copy editor. So my first case on Viral Chef, I got it edited from a professional copy editor suggested by Ivy, and then the cost was a whooping $400 because they suggest Scribendy, and then the copy editors who are there on Scribendy, the amount that it charges again very high. The second copy editing that I got done was from a faculty who used to teach communication in the Purdue University. I came across her and I requested her to do the copy editing on a paid basis for me. But then the cost was probably reduced to to a 1/4 amount that I paid to her. So it was a significant amount of cost saving for me. So that is also, and then again, as I said, that what is obvious again may not be obvious. So for example, terms like fresher or food tech might be very obvious for us, but they might not be very obvious for them. Something like fraternity is very obvious for us. We always say, no, the teaching fraternity, the medical fraternity. But then I got to know that fraternity means something which is very male centric for them. So they always believe in including words like community. So we have to be very specific in terms of what has to be included. Handling reviewers' comments. So whenever we handle the reviewer comments, again, what we have to keep in mind is that in case we are not able to understand what the reviewer is asking, we can politely write back to them asking to explain what exactly the comment is, so that when we are addressing the comment, we have more clarity on it. And then of course there should be a backup plan to deal with rejection. So in case the case is outrightly rejected, we can always zero down on the other journal wherein we would be submitting. But in case it is rejected, still I would say that whatever the rejection remarks come, basis that if we are able to improvise and submit it again to the case publisher, we again have a chance on it. Now, tackling the biggest challenge, that why should an organization volunteer to get a case study written? So I think there are three most common benefits that can be communicated to them. One is, of course, the publicity related benefit, wherein we can convince the organization that if an initiative that they have been taken, that boardroom initiative gets documented, so the access becomes on a global scale, and the organization also gets visibility on a global scale. Plus those case studies can also be used by the organization and their internal training programs. There are also indirect benefits to the protagonist. So most of the time, a lot of B schools, what they do is that when they discuss the case study, sometimes they also call these protagonists, which is again an indirect promotion or a, you know, a good visibility to these protagonists on whom the case study has been written. So that is also you know, an option. Then whenever you submit a case study, I would suggest that this is a must do checklist. If you perform you know, a quick checklist on these parameters, it would be very beneficial because the chances of rejection would be very less. So for example, of course, it should be devoid of plagiarism. Now, organization consent, not all publishers emphasize upon the organization consent, but it is always advisable to take an organization's consent. So Richard Ivey has a defined format of taking an organization consent, without which they do not even entertain a case study for submission, whereas the others might not be having. But in order to avoid any conflicts down the line, being a case author, it is always advisable to take the written consent from the organization that this is the final data that we are using, this is the final case manuscript that is going to be submitted. Kindly review and give us a formal consent in order to proceed. So that will ensure that if there are any conflicts in terms of what is the information which is going on, what has been published, nothing is going to come on the case author. So that is something that you must keep in mind. Next is that it should be having, of course, a clearly defined alternative or a decision point. Again, Ivy does not accept cases which are devoid of a decision point. And then some basic formatting parameters like the case must be entirely in past tense. The timelines must be clear. So they always ask you to begin with an anchor date, and then all the incidences or all the back and forth which goes has to be around that anchor date. So it can be an anchor date, and all these incidences which you mentioned can be before that anchor date. You know, again in a sequence that can be followed. Now, whenever we write the instructor manual, again, what we can keep in mind is that the questions that we are mentioning in the instructor manual, does our case have all the information which has been mentioned into the instructor manual? In case we feel that we have written a question and we have written a sample answer, but then the information is not mentioned into the case study, so those inclusions have to be made. And then of course inclusion of some stronger elements, like what kind of an, so this you would all have learned into the case writing methodology as to how your learning objectives can be very strong, what kind of frameworks you can be using. For example, for the first case study that I wrote on viral chef, I went ahead and did not, you know, the go on to the typical model of Porter 5 forces. Rather, I used a lean startup model and a business model canvas. So that made it interesting for a global audience to read it. Again, for the Ultratech case study, it was a behavior based safety model. And then the recent case study that I wrote, it was on a agile marketing model. So in the contemporary times wherein everybody is moving through digital, through marketing analytics, and through contemporary ways of teaching, your case should also be a reflection of those contemporary methodologies that have to be incorporated. And as I said, it is always advisable to include suggestive readings. For example, if you are planning to submit a case study to Ivy, so I would say that your suggestive reading should be either from Harvard or from Ivy or from any list which is again into the top tier list of publishers. So these are the few glimpses of the case activities that I have been doing. So I have been conducting case workshops with the management institution. This year we also started with a case project internship with a few IMs, and I have also been mentoring faculty and research scholars for case writing. This is just a glimpse of the case workshop that I did at IIM Lucknow, and also a case workshop that we did at IIM Sambalpur, wherein I provided a real field based case study to them. And the protagonist was also invited to be a part of the case study competition, wherein we were judging those finalists there along with me. So, I think the time probably has been very less in terms of giving you a detailed overview of a lot of things, but then I've tried to capture the basic challenges